Why does Apple manufacture iPhones in China, and why doesn't it manufacture them in America? You might think the reason is very simple. Labor costs in China are extremely low. However, it's not that simple. There are other, more significant reasons beyond low labor costs that drive Apple to manufacture in China. We will also discuss the impact of the trade war on Apple and why the company finds itself compelled to bear financial losses or pay additional costs if it decides to move its factories to other countries. Regarding the notion that labor in China is very cheap, I believe this is no longer accurate in our time. Why? Because if we look at the average monthly wages in China in 2009, we find that the average was around $390 per month. By 2018, the average had risen to $1,000, and by 2019, it was expected to reach $1,150. These figures show that wages in China have become higher than in competing countries like the Philippines and Vietnam, and even higher than in some European countries like Croatia. Thus, China is no longer what it used to be in terms of low labor costs. Some studies suggest that the rate of salary increases in China over the past decade could make it comparable to major countries within the next 10 years. According to certain estimates, the wages of Chinese workers are expected to equal those of American workers by 2025. So, the idea that low labor costs are the primary reason Apple continues to manufacture in China is inaccurate. We often hear that manufacturing the iPhone in America would lead to a significant increase in prices. However, this is not entirely true. While prices might rise, the increase would not be astronomical. Estimates suggest that the price could increase by about $65 per iPhone, which is not a substantial rise. Nevertheless, Apple is either unwilling or perhaps unable to manufacture in America. Apple requires manufacturing supplies and a massive workforce to produce the iPhone, a workforce that is challenging to assemble in America. In contrast, China can provide these numbers with ease. Apple needs at least 230,000 to 350,000 workers, a staggering figure, but in China, this is easily achievable, and such a workforce can be sourced from just one city. It's not just about the numbers, but also about skill and training. Workers in China are well-trained and highly proficient at what they do. Moreover, Chinese companies have the capacity to recruit tens of thousands of workers in a single day. For example, in 2007, just 2 months before the launch of the iPhone, Steve Jobs noticed that the prototype iPhone screens were prone to scratches. He requested the company to replace all screens with scratch-resistant ones. This significant change required massive quantities of new screens and equipment. Yet, Chinese factories managed to execute this change within 6 weeks. They even set up new factories with the necessary equipment and workforce within this short time frame. So, when comparing manufacturing in China to America, the scales tip entirely in favor of China. As for manufacturing materials and supplies, this is where the biggest problem lies. The internal components of the iPhone are made from specific materials, including rare earth elements. These elements are extremely rare globally, but China possesses a massive stockpile of them. We can compare this to Saudi Arabia and Venezuela holding the largest oil reserves in the world. Similarly, China holds the largest stock of rare earth elements, which are essential in manufacturing electronics in general. In 2018, China was the largest producer of rare earth elements, producing around 120,000 tons, while holding an estimated reserve of 44 million tons. In contrast, the US produces only about 15,000 tons annually. This large gap in production and reserves highlights how dependent companies like Apple are on China for electronics manufacturing, because China simply holds the raw materials that neither the USA nor other countries can provide as efficiently and in such quantities. China indeed holds a massive stockpile of rare earth elements, around 44 million tons, the largest globally compared to the US, which is only about 1.4 million tons. But if we look at other countries like Vietnam, 22 million tons, Brazil, 22 million tons, and Russia, 12 million tons, one might wonder, why don't these countries compete with China? The answer lies in technology and infrastructure. It's not enough to just have land rich in rare earth elements. You also need advanced technology and equipment to extract and process these elements. It's similar to refining oil. Just as crude oil requires processing to obtain final products like gasoline and kerosene, rare earth elements need complex technologies to reach a usable form. China, unlike other countries, invested in this technology since the early 20th century and currently has the capability to supply the world with around 80% of its rare earth element needs. Environmental challenges. Dealing with rare earth elements produces radioactive waste and severe environmental issues. For example, the USS and other communities may refuse to establish factories to process these materials due to health risks such as cancers and environmental pollution. In contrast, China has over a century of experience handling these wastes, making it superior in this field. The importance of China to Apple. Rare earth elements are used in the manufacturing of many technological products, such as iPhones and other Apple products, electric cars like Tesla medical equipment, and precision electronics. Apple and other companies depend heavily on China because it is not only the largest source of rare earth elements, but it also has the infrastructure and efficiency needed to supply these materials at competitive prices. China as a lever. In the ongoing trade war between China and the US, China is fully aware of the value of these elements and uses them as leverage. For instance, when China recently hinted at possibly reducing its rare earth exports, it caused panic in the United States, which imports about 90% of its rare earth element needs from China options for Apple. If the trade war escalates and Apple's products like iPhones are subject to sanctions or tariffs, Apple may have to move part of its production to other countries like India or Vietnam. It will face significant challenges finding suppliers for rare earth elements at similar prices and processing costs in China. It may seek partnerships with companies specializing in the extraction and processing costs in processing of rare earth elements. But this would require massive investments in time. So far, Apple's core products have largely been unaffected by the trade war, but if tensions continue, the company might have to make more complex strategic decisions. If Apple were forced to leave China due to the escalation of the trade war, or for other reasons, the company could face a wide range of losses and challenges, including 1. Losing a major consumer market. Greater China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, is Apple's third largest consumer market. According to a study published by Forbes, if the trade war intensifies and Apple is directly affected, the company's revenue in this region could see a significant decline. The Chinese market is not only a production base, but also a crucial market that generates substantial revenue for Apple. 2. High costs of relocating production. Moving production from China to other countries like India or Vietnam would take a long time, ranging from 1.5 to 3 years to move 15-30 of production. The cost of relocating could lead to significant losses, including huge investments in setting up new factories, building new supply chains in the host countries, the need to train new workers, price increases due to higher tariffs that might be imposed on Apple products if the trade war escalates. iPhone prices could rise by 15-20. If an iPhone is sold for $1,000, it could rise to around $1,200. This price hike would negatively affect demand, especially in price-sensitive markets. Obstacles in alternative markets. India is the first choice for production relocation, but it faces challenges. High taxes. The Indian government imposes a 20% tax on foreign companies, making costs higher. Weak local market. Apple holds only 1/4 of the smartphone market in India, which is dominated by lower-cost competitors like Xiaomi and Samsung. Brazil and Vietnam. Brazil features high taxes and uncompetitive production costs. Vietnam has the capacity to handle part of Apple's production, but it won't be able to manage the entire production costs. Vietnam has the capacity to handle part of Apple's production with the limited infrastructure. China produces about 80% of the world's rare earth element needs. Financial challenges and economic risks. According to forecasts by JP Morgan analysts, the additional costs to Apple will reflect in product prices and could lead to reduced demand. Relocating production and changing markets could lead to direct financial losses during the years of transition. Future projections. Apple may need to raise prices globally to offset the additional costs. The company may explore new strategies like increasing investments in India or developing alternatives to reduce its dependence on China, but it will continue to face significant challenges in the short to medium term. Overall, Apple's continued presence in China is currently the safest economic option, but it needs contingency plans to ensure the continuity of its operations if the trade dispute worsens.